I'll formally open the meeting. I want to rearrange this, the agenda items, because Nigel Aurelius has to go somewhere. So we'll do item 12 and item 13, and then we'll go back to the beginning. So in the first instance, then, it's item 12, Nigel Aurelius, revenue budget. Over to you, Nigel.
Excuse me, Leader. Would it be best to make some declarations of interest? And I think there might be some apologies first. So if I can deal with the apologies. Thank you, Leader. Yes, just to explain, you've got a prejudicial interest, so you will leave for that item and the Deputy Leader will take over. Thank you.
Nigel, over to you. See the trouble it causes when you've got to go for this?
Thank you, Leader. I've been invited to a roundtable discussion on the integration of health and social care in Cardiff as a representation of Welsh Treasurers. Just need to dispel any myths about where I may be going, given the time of year and the proximity of Santa arriving on the 25th of December. Santa and the budget. There we are. Two things I didn't think you'd get in the same sentence. This is the budget report that sort of follows on from the joint scrutiny meeting which took place on the 19th of November. So large parts of this information have already been in the public domain for some time. That joint scrutiny meeting went on for 5 hours. So it's fair to say that your budget or your emerging budget has been well scrutinised, and we've brought that into this report. In terms of the background, members will know all about the background. Basically, we're facing very challenging financial times. We anticipated some stuff in our medium-term financial plan, but the provisional settlement that came out from the Assembly was much more challenging than we expected when we set the medium-term financial plan in March, although we'd had some indications in the summer from the then Minister. And obviously, within the Welsh Government budget, they are prioritising health at the expense of all other budgets, of which local government then is a major one. In terms of how we were approaching it, we asked all services some time ago to alleviate their pressures and come up with savings measures of reducing by 2%, another 4%, another 4%, up to a cumulative 10%. And there's a table in 5.2 which just shows what that meant for services. The provisional settlement for Torfaen was a reduction of minus 3.9%, which was better than what we were expecting. At the worst end, some authorities at minus 4.5%, but still a long way short of what we were originally anticipating, which was minus 1.3, 1.5. And if you imagine the type of budget we got now and imagine how different it would have been even with what we thought was difficult at the time, minus 1.5, it shows how these swings are significant. The table in the report shows how the settlement has moved from this year to next year, and I don't intend to go into it in any great detail. There are some transfers into the settlements which are all articulated. We obviously then build our estimates. We don't balance on control totals or assumed budgets. We then work from the ground up and then match it with the savings we've got. And the table there in 7.2 shows you the pressures we've got. This is excluding schools. Schools have their own set of pressures, totaling 9.6 million, which is just over 4 million of service pressures and £5 million in terms of Welsh Government reductions. And then the table overleaf just shows then how we're proposing to balance that, and members will know, I've been trying to anchor it so that all services have to reduce their budgets by 2% rather than in some councils you've got some service areas that are not protected, looking at savings, over 10%. and significantly over 10%, which does mean that services simply end then, and that's not been your policy position. Your policy position has been to try and keep as many of the services going, even if it's at slightly lower standard. I think someone says you can't turn something back on once it's been turned off, which is probably relevant in terms of the merger. The mitigation options then are not repeated within this report. There's a hyperlink to the scrutiny report where all the savings have been in the public domain. What I have put in this report is the recommendations. There's 11 recommendations from scrutiny for you as an executive to consider. None of them destabilise the budget in any great or any significant way. There are a couple of savings that are you're being asked to reconsider. They're quite minor, and there's a particular saving around social care and housing, around foster carers, which you're being asked to reconsider. The rest of the points are mainly about information or clarification and amplification of what we said at the scrutiny meeting. Now, as part of the Cabinet report on the 20th of January, there will be answers from you as an executive to all of those recommendations and, where necessary, alternative savings measures. Section 9 of the report just runs quickly through the corporate mitigation options that we've put in to try and help the balance. We've played many of these out before. Obviously, when we were doing the original estimates, we were looking at a pay provision of 2%, and it's now 1.4%, the cost this year. We're looking at the council tax collection rate, and we've taken the assumption up, and various other measures in there, such as the tax base rising, which we'll come on to on the next item. All of those have helped anchor it still at minus 2% broadly, in terms of reduction of everyone's budget, although the actual patterns of reductions will vary because the pressures that were originally in the medium-term financial plan compared to the estimates have changed around. So the final analysis will be some services will be contributing more than others, but none will be, all are still, at minus 2 off their original budget. In terms of engagement, the report just brings out the roadshows that we held, and whilst they didn't produce the numbers that we wanted in terms of attendance, they were a good starting point. The materials were all out there. The budget simulator seems to have gone down well, and actually the WLGA sort of being complimentary about our approach. So we've just got to try and develop that for future years. There's a section then on risks, which are mainly around the numbers of mitigation measures, the capacity, etc., etc., etc. The last part of the report then is about the monitoring position for 2014-15, which shows an improved position from the last time we reported it. We're broadly online overall. The biggest pressure area remains social care and housing, but significantly less than it was. Sue and her colleagues working with us have been really driving that down, and actually Sue, her leadership, and our opinion is, if patterns of spending continue as they have historically, that saving will come down even more from then, and then will largely be explained by children in care that weren't anticipated when the budgets are set, with very, very complex needs. And if the final analysis comes down to that kind of level, that is what reserves are for. They couldn't have been anticipated at the time, and it takes a while then to manage them through the system. So a much more improving picture in relation to that. The final parts of the report then just take you through what's likely to happen next, and what will come forward in the new year. The January 2015 Cabinet report will consider the final settlement. Now, we will lose on the final settlement because of the tax base, because our tax base is going to go up considerably. But hopefully we won't lose more than the additional gain I've already deployed into the budget. We haven't deployed all the gain we expect into the current budget, and hopefully if we've got that just about right, although we lose, it shouldn't destabilise things too much. We've then got to finance the shortfall that's outlined in 7.3. We've got to address all the recommendations from joint scrutiny. There's some one-off funding around grant areas, particularly in community services, where we're expecting new grants to come in later in the year, so therefore we don't want to incur redundancy costs and then have to look to re-employ people, so we're going to look to bridge that. Something around capital fees, and then final balancing and reconciliation issues. That'll appear until February, just as a little catch-all that we'll have to do some things. Cabinet the 10th of February, that's when you'll decide your recommendation on council tax, and then it'll move forward to council. And obviously the savings measures now, if you endorse them as you're approving them subject to what happened at scrutiny, they'll be subject now to a detailed equality impact assessment process, so that can all form part of the final budget considerations in Council to early March, 3rd of March. So I think we're in a reasonably good position, Leader. We had a meeting with the trade unions this morning, and they've raised no areas of significant concern, but I'm sure Councillor Hunt will report on that. And we also went to the Schools Forum a couple of weeks ago, and again they endorsed the fact and thanked the authority for honouring the protection. And indeed, they did make a comment that in other councils that's not so. But that doesn't alleviate the fact that schools have got quite a lot of pressures to manage as well, even with the protection being honoured. Thank you, Leader.
Right, thanks very much for that, Nigel. Anthony, do you want to make some comments?
Just to kick off by thanking Nigel again for the calm and strategic way that he's dealt with the budget, as always. I think it's a great bonus, and I said this in the scrutiny meeting to us as an authority, that we have a Section 151 officer who has such authority within the council, and who sort of sets the tone for the budget. And that counts for other officers as well, and cabinet members who have dealt with the budget as we tend to do in the council, in a very sort of corporate whole council way, rather than sort of descending into battles between different silos. And I think that's something that's very valuable in taking the budget forward. The scrutiny report, the results of which are really summarised in 8.1, I think that's a very valuable process. I think every year that goes by, that process gets stronger as members go into the budget, and literally took 5 hours working through it line by line a couple of weeks back now. And I think that's a valuable process to help them sort of understand and to properly scrutinise the budget. I was pleased to be able to attend that meeting and answer the questions of the Joint Scrutiny Committee. I'd stress the recommendation 3 within the report at the end there. Says that we're agreeing it's subject to the recommendations of the Scrutiny Committee. I think there's a number of points in there that we've already agreed to take into account, a number of points that we can answer, and I look forward to responding to the Scrutiny Committee. Obviously, this is not the first year we've had to make such savings, and it gets more difficult each year as the easy options get taken away. And I think in that light, it's right that we embarked on an improved system of consultation and engagement. As Nigel said, we spoke to the trade unions again this morning about the budget, and we're trying to take them with us as part of taking our staff with us wherever we can. We also spoke to the public at the meetings and used the Ready Reckoner, which I think is a really good way of explaining to people the plethora of council services that are run. The fact that the council tax that they pay doesn't just go on collecting the bins. There's a range of services, from social care to schools to waste to lots of other things that the council has to run. And I think that's been a valuable exercise, and something I hope we can build on again year by year. Perhaps one of the most telling sort of outcomes of that consultation was the best sort of session as such was in Widdershins with the Age Connects with the Older People's Forum, and maybe how we can next year try and get into pre-existing sort of community groups to sort of engage with them on that basis. The difficulty with calling meetings before you come out with proposals is that maybe not so many people turn up. It's a bit of a catch-22 situation, really, because if you hold the meetings after coming out with proposals, people rightly say, why didn't you ask us first? So that's something we need to consider and to build on going forwards, but I think we've done the right thing this year in building on it from previous years. Of course, all councils of all political persuasions are struggling to deal with the massive cuts that are being handed down to them. It's sort of sometimes some of the debate focuses on Just Torfaen, but of course we're not doing this in isolation. This is not a situation of our making. This is a situation that's been handed down on us, and we can all wish it was different. Two key statistics, perhaps to remember. It's the first one being that there's £1.5 billion less to pay for public services in Wales since the beginning of the Parliament, since 2010. And this year, as Nigel said, that means £5.3 million less for us to spend as a council on vital local services. Now, we're clear, I think, as a council here, where the responsibility for those cuts lies. It lies in Westminster. The government are making savage cuts to public services that are having a real impact on the very fabric of our society. But as much as we oppose those cuts, we have to deal with the situation that we face. And we've done that by, I think, trying to take the least worst options that we could, by putting services first. The corporate measures that Nigel referred to may seem very dry, but they're a way of reducing the impact of the cuts in our funding on frontline services, and I think that's very important. We've also been trying to do a bit more work on cutting the cost of management and on the cost of administration in the council, and I hope to be able to give some more details as we take the budget forward in January and February about the quantum of those measures that we've taken. I wish that measures like that could alleviate the problem in full. Unfortunately, they won't, given the magnitude of the savings that we have to make. But in the measures that we've taken forward, I believe that we've tried to protect the vulnerable wherever possible. And of course, we've tried to protect local employment and our hard-working staff. I think it's worth saying that specifically at every point in this process. Local government as a whole and local government staff has sometimes had a bit of a rough deal in recent years in the media. But we've got to remember that the majority of our staff get paid less than £17,000 a year. They've worked very hard to try and keep vital local services running. They've not had a real terms pay rise for a number of years now. And I think it's important that we say as a council, as councillors, how much we value the staff and how much we recognise the impact on them of having to make cutbacks. They're having to do quite often more work with fewer of them. So I think it's important that we send the message out as members today that we value the work that our staff do. The second thing, and I mentioned this again at scrutiny, is how we have to view our responsibility as a local employer. It may be different, for councils in large cities or affluent areas, but we have to remember that in a Valleys authority as we are one of the major employers in the area, and any sort of measures that we take, we have to consider both in terms of their impacts on individuals, on impacts on our staff, and also their impact on the local economy. And if we didn't act responsibility in that way, it would benefit no one within the local authority, whether they be a private sector business or a public sector employee. So that's the situation that faces us. As I've said before many times, it's not a situation that we would choose, but it's a situation I think we have to deal with calmly and strategically, and have to find the least worst way of getting through it.
Well done, Anthony. Anybody else got any comments they want to make? If not, then can I thank both Anthony and Nigel and the staff for the way that they've worked. I endorse, by the way, your sentiments on thanking the staff, who we treasure. But at the same time, I also wanted to thank you and Nigel and other staff that worked hard on this. We didn't arrive here by accident. There was a lot of work went into this. Cabinet members met on a number of different times to discuss it, along with officers. What I found sad, I also want to thank Stuart Ashley, who I watched this on the webcam. Excellent chairmanship of that scrutiny committee. I want to convey that to him, both publicly and otherwise. What I find sad is that some of our worst critics within the council didn't bother to turn up for that scrutiny committee. They had the opportunity to come there and raise whatever points they wanted, to challenge what they wanted. However, they didn't do that. That's best left to them. So thank you all, and in particular thanks to Stuart Ashley, who chaired what was about a 5-hour scrutiny. That's a bit of a record, I think, and you've done it very, very well. So thanks for that. All in favour of the recommendations? Thanks very much. On the next one, I must leave.
Okay, the leader has left, so it's not gone long enough for us to talk about him, so we'll get straight on with Councillor Tutt.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. This won't be long. This is the report I have to bring at this time every year, just to formally approve the tax base that I've already submitted to the Welsh Government. I have to submit it by the end of by mid-November. So I'm just going to concentrate on the key messages. We've agreed to increase our collection rate assumption from 98% to 99%. That obviously has an impact on our Band D base positively. Our overall base is going to increase by 830 properties this time. There's three main reasons. The first is obviously the actual, it's an estimated base when it's done, and there's some movements between that and then the actual for 14-15. The collection rates makes a significant impact to the Band D properties, and then there's an estimate of new properties, and that's what makes up the 830 properties. As I indicated on the budget, we will lose on the final settlement, but it'll be whatever our increase is relative to the overall all Wales increase, and the collection rate assumption doesn't come into that at all, because they always go on a 100% tax base. In respect of prescribed classes A and B, that we're going to continue to apply a 0% discount, no change there. But from the 1st of April 2015, we will bring in the recommendation you made this time last year for those in Class C. Those are empty properties, taking the discount from 50% to 0% to try and encourage people to bring those properties back into use. You agreed it last year, and you agreed us bringing it in this year, and we've obviously been corresponding with the people affected in the interim. And also with the bills, we always send out paper information, council tax leaflet it's called, and we're proposing this year to be in line with other councils to supply that electronically, but obviously if anyone wishes to have a paper copy, we'll have supplies there that we'll be able to send out to people individually if they request it, but it's just bringing us into line with many other councils. There's nothing much more to say on it. It's the routine report, and I put the recommendations.
Okay, thank you, Nigel. Anthony, you want to say anything? Any members got any comments on it? Okay, everybody happy to move that? Right, thanks.
Right then, we need now to go back to the beginning of the agenda, and we'll go to the minutes then. So I'll go through them page by page. Page 1, sorry, page 4 actually. Page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, and I think, is that it? Yes, it is.
That's the 7th of October.
Sorry?
That's the 7th of October.
Yes. Somebody move? Move. Thanks very much. Osho? Thank you. Now then, on to the next set of minutes, which is of the 20th of October, page 1. Sorry, 13 actually. 14, 15. I've got a blank on this page. Has everybody got that? I don't know what's happened here with these minutes, but my pages are all the wrong way. Are yours the same? Anyway, on the minutes of October, shall I move the data to record? Thanks very much. On now to the action sheet. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Leader. The action sheet is there for members' information unless there are any questions.
Right, thanks for that. On to item 7, agenda item 7, which is, I think it's Christina Harry. Yeah, over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I've got 2 reports for you to consider this morning around waste management. The first one is regarding the need to award a contract for the operation and management of our household waste recycling centre. The current contract that we have for the management and operation of the household waste recycling centre expires on the 31st of March next year. Members will also recall that we have a new household waste recycling centre currently being constructed, and that's intended and planned to open in the new year as well. So the new contract will be for the management and operation of the new household waste recycling centre, and also the existing one, which will just be a transfer station alone. So it's covering both of those sites. Before we actually decided to go out to the market again, we actually undertook an options appraisal around, was there a different way of delivering this service? And amongst other areas, we did consider, was it appropriate to bring this service in-house? But on balance, having done our options appraisal, we felt it appropriate and most in terms of delivering value for money, the best thing to do is actually go out to the open market for the contract. So we've undertaken an extensive procurement exercise. There was a lot of appetite from the market for this contract, which is very good. And we undertook a quality cost evaluation and assessment through that procurement process. The contract is intended to be awarded from April next year, and the duration of that contract is for 7 years, with the option to extend it for a further 3 years on an annual basis if we so wish. The financial aspects of this contract are all within existing budgets, so there's no additional cost to this contract. So I'll move straight to the recommendations, if I may, Leader, and that is to award the contract on a fixed price basis for the first 3 years of the contract to contractor A, and the value of that contract for those 3 years is £2.8 million. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Anything to say, John?
Nothing to say on that, Chair.
Right, well, recommendations on page 27. All agreed, show. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Leader. This report is around our long-standing collaboration for waste procurement with our colleagues in Blaenau Gwent. If I can just remind members of the history of this collaboration, it's starting back in 2004. So I remember the moment well. It's a long-standing relationship we have. And the aim of this collaboration was to undertake joint procurement on waste services with our colleagues. And the reason behind that collaboration was around sharing our resources, sharing our skills, and saving money in the process. What that group has done since 2004 is undertaken a number of interim contracts jointly around our food waste, our garden waste, and also our residual waste. And those interim contracts are in place to allow us to procure a 25-year contract for our food and green waste. So we began that work back in 2006 on the long-term organics contract, and using a very extensive procurement process guided by Welsh Government called Competitive Dialogue. Over a series of years, we managed to get the 28 original bidders down to 2. And we got to that position earlier this year. And you will recall I informed Cabinet at that time that there were 2 shortlisted tenderers decided for commercial reasons to drop out of the procurement. Now, that not only had an implication for us in the South East Wales region, but it had a knock-on effect for the South West region as well, because they were bidding for the same contracts as well. So essentially, earlier this year, we got back to the drawing board, and we engaged again with Welsh Government, and we've been working with Welsh Government and our colleagues across the region to look at the best way to procure these long-term food and garden waste contracts collectively. So we've once again got to the position where we are about to embark on 2 separate regional procurements, a South-West procurement hub and a South-East procurement hub. The South-East procurement hub will consist of ourselves, Blaenau Gwent, Caerphilly, and Caerphilly joined the heads of the Valley Procurement Hub about 18 months ago. And also new to the table is Monmouthshire. Monmouthshire would like to join the South East Wales Procurement Hub. So embarking upon that procurement, Welsh Government have once again given us their support financially for this procurement, both in terms of helping us fund the procurement costs and also to fund the 25% of our gate fee costs for the duration of the 25-year contract. So a substantial financial commitment from the Welsh Government. For in return for that financial commitment, they want the buy-in of the local authorities, and the buy-in of the local authorities needs to be bound into a document called a Memorandum of Understanding. And that Memorandum of Understanding essentially just binds us together as a group of local authorities to develop an outline business case for the new contract. We've already signed up to a Memorandum of Understanding with the authorities that we're with already, and I brought that report to you back in 2006 and you signed that off. This Memorandum of Understanding is essentially the same, but it's just bringing Monmouthshire to the table. So that is what I'm asking Cabinet to approve this morning. But I just want to add that the Memorandum of Understanding, whilst it's not legally binding, it's the first stage of an inter-authority agreement, which is a legally binding contract between the authorities. And we will need to enter into an inter-authority agreement to formalise the partnership for the remaining stages of the procurement and also the management of the regional contract there afterwards. But again, it's something that we've already considered, and that will be subject of a separate report for you to agree at a later date. So in terms of... Yes, so I move to the recommendations, Leader.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. John?
No. Just to support the recommendation, Chairman, I think that the other three parties, Torfaen, Blenheim and Caerphilly, are all on board with this, and this is a recommendation that will be going to their cabinets as well.
Good. Anybody else? If not, then recommendations on page 35. All agree? Sure. Thanks very much. Thank you. Next one is the Code of Corporate Governance, and this is Linda Willis.
When you can hear me, sorry about that. This is part of your corporate governance role. And I'm presenting it as chair of the Corporate Governance Review Group, which is an officer group. Part of what we've done is help produce the annual governance statement that you will have seen and approved at Council as part of the accounts. And the other part of our work stream has been to draw up a draft code of corporate governance. And we followed guidance from SIPFA and Solace, as it says in the report. There's nothing new in this code other than we've followed the framework set out to draw everything together, all our processes, all our activities about how we do business, so that it is clear and transparent and will be all in one document for our staff and the public. And there are six principles in 5.2, and you'll see when you come to the code that it's in a tabular formula. So we've got some supporting principles for those basic principles, and we've got activities and processes that are set out. And if I just scroll down after the introduction, you'll see how that draws all the processes that you will be familiar with in a structured way. So the recommendation is just for you to approve that draft Code of Corporate Governance. It's already been to Audit Committee and it's taken on board their observations. So if you have any questions.
Thank you for that, Linda. Any questions for Linda? You need to take opportunity now because she isn't very often in the hot seat. Any questions?
Just ask Linda, how does this tie in with the remuneration draft report that's been put to us? Because it seems to me there's some similarities within there that's in the in this draft document that's put out. What do they call themselves now? The Independent Remuneration Panel, about support to elected members, etc., etc.
I'm not sure, other than looking through the principles, that would specifically be mentioned. But obviously, when we talk about the ethical framework and the codes and the behaviours, then the the draft code that we've got will set out that we have an Ethics and Standards Committee, that we have a remuneration scheme, where to find it, etc. So that will just feed into all the suite of documents that are part of the governance. Okay.
Any questions, Linda? If not, then the recommendations are on page 59. All agree, show. Thanks very much. Thank you, Linda. Next one is item 10, and decision to allocate a third sector grant within the community service revenue budget. This is Dave Congreve.
Thank you, Leader. This is a very brief report which usually comes in from the Cabinet this time of year, and it's simply to seek authority from you, if you wish to appoint some members to advise the Executive Member for Communities who holds the responsibility to allocate third sector grants. So the recommendation is simply that you approve... Oh, hang on a second, I'm on the wrong thing. What I should have done is moved us forward. Sorry about that. So the recommendation is in front of you.
I got it, you, Dave?
Yeah, and it's that the Cabinet approves the proposal to appoint up to 4 other members with whom the Executive Member for Communities must consult prior to making the decisions on the allocation of third sector grants. Thank you, Chair.
And those 4 members are Councillor Anthony Hunt, Councillor Jessica Power, Councillor Jeffries, and in reserve, Councillor Stuart Ashley. All agree? Show. Thanks very much. Thank you for that, Dave. The next is item 11, which is European Social Fund. You doing this, Dave?
Yep. Thank you, Leader. It's a little bit more complicated, but it won't take too much time. I'm just going to sort of introduce the report, and then if there are any matters of detail, then we have Karen and Rob, both of whom have put an enormous amount of work into positioning Torvine very well for European Social Fund aid, both in the past and going forward. This report, Leader, is just to bring Cabinet up to date with work that's going on at an officer level that will find its way into the political arena very shortly, as WEFO are turning up the pace on helping us prepare for the next round of funding under European projects. Essentially, all I'm going to do is take you to the key messages on in front of you on page 33. Those key messages are that European Social Fund, which you'll be aware of, is absolutely key to delivery of a number of our corporate plan priorities, particularly those around helping people who are currently out of work, seeking to re-engage, people who are looking to progress in terms of their skills and abilities, and particularly in terms of this authority at this point in time, tackling the NEETs issue that we've had so much success with as a result of having access to this kind of provision. So ESF funding is key to all of those things. Partnership agreements and a range of things at a sort of a UK and European level are now progressing quite quickly, having been stalled for a little while. And then the third key message, really, just to position the report for you, is that we believe that we've done a particularly good job, I think, particularly through the teams that I referred to, Karen and Rob's team, in terms of delivery as a lead sponsor for some existing programmes, and therefore it makes sense for us to lead the same types of collaboration as we move into the new round of European funding. So those are the key messages. There's quite a lot of background information, and apologies for all the abbreviations in there. This stuff has a language of its own. I think we have explained them all in the report, but if there are any clarification needed, do let me know. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the background, but I will take any questions and field those with colleagues if we need to, and I'll simply take you to the recommendations if I can.
Right, thanks for that. Any questions? Ant?
Just to welcome the report, and especially 2 issues that it takes up. Firstly, the in-work poverty trap, which is something that I think is affecting all our constituents ever more. The number of people who are in work are having to turn to either food banks or you know, having trouble doing basic things like heating their homes. It's something that's very concerning. I'm glad that mentions this. And the second one is the plight of young people, especially in the economy as it is at the moment. They're often, you know, if they have job opportunities, they're given 0-hour contracts or terms and conditions that you know aren't conducive to supporting them in sort of developing their lives, getting a family, getting a place to live, and I think all we can do to help those people is well worth doing.
Anybody else want to make Lewis?
Yes, I entirely support what Anthony has said. We've got to be aware of Dave's department. You know, the difference they are making is unbelievable. When we think of Jobs Growth Wales and other such schemes that are working within Torvine, you know, it's certainly lessening the impact of some of the most savage of the government cuts that have come into Wales, and thank the department for it. Thank you.
Anybody else want to make a comment? If not, you see the recommendations on the agreed, Sean? Thanks very much. Thank you, Dave. Well, it seems to me now that we've done item 12 and 13, so that's the end of the meeting. Merry Christmas to those of you that are not going to attend the council, and I'll close the meeting.